My name is Chloe Davison, and I am 29 years old. I live in Oak Haven Dale, a quiet town nestled in the heart of the valley, a place that always felt a bit too small for my big dreams. My world, for as long as I can remember, revolved around my art. I was a digital artist, specializing in intricate illustrations that told stories without words, pieces that would capture emotion and movement in a single frame. I poured my soul into every brushstroke, every pixel, often working late into the night in my small, cozy home studio, surrounded by sketchbooks filled with half-formed ideas and the soft glow of my monitor. I loved the freedom of freelance work, the idea of being my own boss, of creating on my own terms, but it came with its own unique challenges. The main one was the constant, nagging battle against my own doubts, what some people call imposter syndrome. Even when clients raved about my work, even when I knew I had delivered something truly special, a tiny voice in my head would whisper that I wasn't quite good enough, that I was somehow faking it. This made me prone to undervaluing myself, especially in those early days, a habit I was slowly, painstakingly trying to break. I was a diligent worker, perhaps too eager to please, always striving for perfection. My distinct quality, I think, was that quiet determination, a resilience that often surprised even myself. I wanted to create beauty, to leave a mark, and I was willing to work tirelessly to achieve it. This particular problem, the one that would reshape my understanding of justice and consequence, first began years ago, when I was much younger, maybe 24 or 25, just starting out, fresh out of art school and trying desperately to make a name for myself in the competitive creative industry. To pay the bills, to keep the lights on and my art supplies stocked, I took a part-time office job in the city, a place that was far removed from the artistic haven I longed for. It was there, amidst the fluorescent lights and the hum of computers, that I met Ellie. Ellie was a few years older than me, confident, almost aggressively so, with an air that suggested she knew exactly where she was going and how to get there. She had a striking presence, always impeccably dressed, her dark hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, and her eyes held a spark of ambition that was both captivating and a little intimidating. There was also an air of mystery about her, a carefully constructed aura of self-made success. She often spoke about her past, how she had moved from a very traditional part of the country, a place she described as steeped in strict family rules and ancient customs, especially for women. She had made a brave break for it, she said, came to the capital, went to university, found her own path, carving out a life of independence that seemed to defy all expectations. I admired her fierce determination, her apparent willingness to challenge the norms she had grown up with. She seemed like a kindred spirit, a fellow professional trying to make her way in the world. One ordinary Tuesday, Ellie approached me at work, her eyes gleaming with an idea. She was working on a big project, something hush-hush, she explained, for a very important high-profile client. She needed a specific kind of illustration, something conceptual, something that matched my unique style perfectly. She described it vaguely, using industry buzzwords that I, in my naive enthusiasm, barely understood. It was something about visualizing new urban development, a piece that would capture the spirit of growth and modernity, an abstract yet evocative image. She made it sound incredibly important, a career-making opportunity. Then she offered me a payment. It was ridiculously small, barely enough to cover the hours I would pour into it, let alone the skill and creativity involved. That insidious imposter syndrome, That nagging voice in my head that constantly whispered doubts told me to just take it, that any work was good work, that I should be grateful for the opportunity to contribute to such a grand project, even if the pay was laughable. Despite the prickling unease, the feeling that something wasn't quite right, I agreed. I told myself it was for the exposure, for the chance to work on something big. I poured hours into that illustration, meticulously crafting every detail, ensuring it was perfect, truly proud of the final result. I remember staying up late, tweaking colors, refining lines, completely lost in the creative process. It was a beautiful piece, if I do say so myself, one of my best at that time. I sent it to Ellie. She confirmed receipt with a brief email, sent the meager payment to my bank account, and that was that. I added it to my online portfolio, a small, proud entry among my other works, with a simple caption, and then I promptly moved on, completely forgetting the vague details of the grand project she had mentioned. I was busy, focused on my own burgeoning freelance career. The true heart of the problem, was that I trusted her. I thought she was a fellow creative, a professional peer, someone who valued artistry and integrity. I was naive, and that naivety, that willingness to believe in the best of people, would eventually cost me more than just my art. It would set in motion a chain of events far beyond my control. My nemesis, Ellie, had just made her first move, a subtle but significant one, and I had absolutely no idea what kind of storm was brewing, what kind of far-reaching consequences would arise from that single, seemingly minor transaction. Years passed, a blur of late nights, creative breakthroughs, and the slow, steady growth of my artistic career. I finally took the leap and quit that part-time office job, becoming a full-time freelancer, slowly but surely building my reputation in the digital art world. The illustration I did for Ellie, that abstract cityscape design, was buried deep in my online portfolio archives, a forgotten memory, one of many pieces I had created in my early days. It was just a small line item, a one-off commission I barely thought about anymore. I was moving forward, focusing on new projects, new clients. Then, out of the blue, the universe decided to remind me of that forgotten piece. I received an email from someone I didn't know, a project manager from a large, well-known architectural firm. The email was polite, professional, but it had a curious tone. Attached was a screenshot. My heart stopped. It was my illustration, the very one I had painstakingly created for Ellie all those years ago. The email asked if it was indeed my work, specifically if I had licensed it for a project called Viridian City, a massive, high-profile urban development that had been in the news a few years prior, though it had eventually stalled. My stomach dropped. I remembered Viridian City as the name Ellie had mumbled vaguely when she commissioned me, a detail I had promptly dismissed as irrelevant at the time. My hands trembled as I typed my reply, confirming that yes, it was unequivocally my work, and that no, I had never licensed it to any architectural firm. I explained that I had only sold a one-time usage right to a former coworker, Ellie, years ago, for a small, rather insignificant payment. The project manager responded quickly, her next email laced with confusion and a hint of frustration. Apparently, Ellie had presented my artwork as entirely her own, a key visual for a major presentation, a cornerstone of their conceptual designs for the Viridian City project. She had used my art, passed it off as her creation, and received a significant amount of credit and payment for it, potentially even winning the initial contract based on its impact. The project, it turned out, had stalled for various complex reasons unrelated to the art, never officially released to the public, which explained why I hadn't seen my work circulating, why I hadn't known about its grander application. Both Ellie and I had long since left that initial office job, gone our separate ways. My first instinct was a fiery, indignant rage. Plagiarism. My art. My hard work stolen, not just for a small commission, but for a huge, high-stakes project. I felt a visceral sense of violation, a deep injustice. I considered contacting Ellie, demanding an explanation, demanding recognition, demanding restitution. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, ready to unleash a furious email. But then I hesitated. What good would it do? The project was dead, stalled indefinitely. She was gone from my life, just a distant memory. It felt like a petty, isolated incident, a wrong that, while galling, was in the past. Would pursuing it truly make a difference? Would it be worth the energy, the emotional toll? I told myself to let it go, to focus on my future, on my real clients, on the new, exciting opportunities that were finally coming my way. I convinced myself that I had learned my lesson about trusting people too easily, about valuing my work appropriately. So I did. I tucked away the email exchange, a bitter lesson learned about integrity and boundaries, and continued to build my career, believing I had escaped further entanglement with Ellie. This was my first failure, my first critical mistake. I let the slight fester, a silent, unaddressed wound that would eventually become infected, growing in the dark, waiting for the opportune moment to manifest. I thought I was being pragmatic, letting go of something small. I had no idea I was paving the way for something much, much larger. More years rolled by, bringing with them success and stability. I was now 29, well established in my field, working for a reputable creative agency in Oakhaven Dale, a place where my art truly thrived, where my skills were valued and respected. I had a beautiful, sunlit studio, a growing list of satisfied clients, and a quiet confidence that had replaced my old imposter syndrome. Life was good, truly good. I felt fulfilled, finally in a place where my passion and my profession were perfectly aligned. My days were filled with exciting projects, collaborations, and the satisfaction of seeing my creative visions come to life. I felt secure, finally at peace with my journey. Then, the universe, with its cruel and ironic sense of humor, decided to bring Ellie back into my life, a ghost from a forgotten past. Our agency was hiring for a senior creative role, a position that required not only exceptional artistic vision, but also strong leadership skills, someone who could guide and inspire a team. The applications flooded in, hundreds of hopeful candidates vying for the coveted spot. One crisp autumn morning, as I scrolled through the digital candidate profiles, reviewing portfolios and resumes, a familiar name leaped out at me from the screen. Ellie. My blood ran cold. Ellie applying here, to my workplace, to a senior position that would put her in direct contact with me, potentially even as my superior. A wave of nausea washed over me. I saw her face in the headshot, still confident, still poised, her eyes still holding that same unyielding ambition I remembered. A decade, almost, had passed since the plagiarism incident. I had almost entirely forgotten it, relegated it to the distant archives of bad memories. Almost. A part of me, the part that had preached pragmatism and letting go, whispered to ignore it. What was a minor plagiarism from years ago, between colleagues, now that so much time had passed? Was it really my place to intervene? But another part, the part that remembered the countless hours I poured into that stolen art, the part that remembered feeling cheapened and betrayed, the part that had a deep, unwavering respect for artistic integrity, screamed for justice. It was a silent battle waged within my own mind, a moral dilemma that gnawed at me constantly. I watched Ellie during her interviews, a knot tightening in my stomach with each passing day. She charmed everyone effortlessly. She presented herself flawlessly, with an impressive, glossy portfolio that I now looked at with a cynical eye, wondering which pieces were truly hers. Her narrative of career progression, her journey from a traditional background to a self-made, successful professional, was compelling, inspiring even. She spun a tale of ambition and talent that resonated with our agency's values. She was exactly the kind of candidate our leadership team was looking for, a shining example of determination and skill. They were serious about hiring her, very serious. They were on the cusp of offering her the job, discussing salary and benefits, preparing the final contract. This was my moment, my chance to speak up, to reveal the truth, or to forever hold my peace and watch her walk into my professional life, carrying a secret that felt like a stain on my own integrity. I wrestled with it for days, the decision weighing heavily on my shoulders. Was it truly revenge, or was it just righting a wrong? Would it seem petty, vindictive, born of old resentment? Or was it my duty, as an employee and as an artist, to protect my company from a dishonest individual, and perhaps to protect other potential victims of her pattern of deceit? The thought of her walking into my office every single day, her stealing my work, her profiting from my effort, her deceptive past lurking beneath her polished facade, it gnawed at me, creating a churning unease in my stomach that wouldn't let up. I couldn't stomach it. I made my decision, a choice that felt both necessary and terrifying. I approached my director, a stern but fair woman named Ms. Davies, who valued honesty above all else. I explained, calmly, as professionally as I could, about the past incident. I showed her the old email exchange with the architectural firm, the undeniable screenshot of my art, the project manager's clear confirmation of Ellie's plagiarism. I laid out the facts, holding back my anger, presenting it as a professional concern, a warning about a candidate's integrity rather than a personal vendetta. I emphasized that this was about character, about trust. Ms. Davies listened, her expression unreadable, her gaze steady. She didn't interrupt, simply absorbed every word, every piece of evidence. She thanked me for the information and assured me she would look into it thoroughly, that integrity was paramount to our agency. A few days later, Ellie's application was quietly withdrawn. She wasn't hired. No explanation was given publicly, but I knew. I felt a surge of triumph, a quiet, almost righteous satisfaction. Justice, I thought, had finally been served. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, there was no confrontation, but it was effective. I had stopped her. I truly believed that was the end of it, that I had achieved a small victory, that I had won. But I was so terribly wrong. This was the moment where I went as low as I could go, not emotionally, perhaps, but ethically, by making a decision that had far-reaching and unintended consequences. I thought I was simply righting a wrong, holding someone accountable, but I had no idea the true extent of the ripple effect I had just set in motion. The problem wasn't solved. It was amplified, made worse in ways I could not have possibly imagined. My small act of justice, fueled by a decade-old resentment and a desire for accountability, was about to become a devastating tidal wave, one that would crash down on Ellie's entire life, far beyond the confines of a job application. I thought I had merely closed a door for her. Instead, I had inadvertently sealed her fate, sending her spiraling into a situation far worse than any career setback. All may be lost for her because of me, and the realization was a long, slow, agonizing burn. The days after Ellie's application was withdrawn felt strangely quiet. I had expected a profound sense of relief, a triumphant lightness, but instead, a lingering, unsettling unease settled in. My colleagues seemed normal, completely unaware of the small, silent battle I had fought in the quiet corridors of the agency. Life at the agency went on, busy and demanding, and I threw myself into my work, trying to push the incident and the vague sense of disquiet it left to the back of my mind. Months turned into half a year, then almost a full year. The memory of Ellie faded into the background, becoming just another small anecdote in my professional history. Then, one crisp evening, I ran into Liam, a former coworker from that very first office job, the one where I had met Ellie, the job that felt like a lifetime ago. We were at a creative industry networking event in Oak Haven, Dale, a bustling gathering of designers, artists, and marketing professionals, all mingling over lukewarm coffee and stale pastries. Liam and I chatted, catching up on old times, swapping stories about our respective career paths since we last saw each other. He seemed happy, thriving. The conversation drifted naturally to shared acquaintances, and he mentioned he had recently heard from another old colleague of ours. That's when the subject of Ellie came up. "You know Ellie?" Liam asked, his voice softening with a touch of pity, a hint of genuine concern I hadn't expected. "Poor thing. Things really didn't work out for her, did they?" My stomach clenched, a cold knot forming deep inside. My heart, which had been beating normally just moments before, suddenly began to pound against my ribs. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to sound casual, trying to keep my voice even, but I could feel the blood draining from my face. Liam explained that after she didn't get the job at my agency, it had apparently been the final, decisive blow for Ellie. Apparently, she had been struggling for a while before that. Her career, despite her impressive facade and the confident way she presented herself, had been a series of near misses, dead ends, and short-term contracts. She hadn't been able to secure a stable, high-paying role, the kind of professional security that would have allowed her to live independently. Her dating life, too, had been a struggle, a series of failed relationships. She had had a few boyfriends, he said, but nothing ever stuck. Nothing ever led to the kind of independent, modern life she so desperately craved, the one she had envisioned for herself away from her roots. She had put everything, absolutely everything, into building a life away from her family's traditions, relying entirely on her career success and her own choices to define herself. And now, at 29, the same age as me, she had run out of options. She had no safety net, no fallback. She had burned all her bridges with her family when she left, severing ties to pursue her own path. But now, with nowhere else to go, with no career prospects left, she had been forced to return home. Home, back to that strict Muslim region, back to the very place she had desperately tried to escape, the culture she had so bravely, so defiantly rejected. Liam's words painted a devastating picture, a raw, brutal image of a life unraveling. Ellie, the fiercely independent woman who had broken free, who had seemed so confident and self-assured, was now trapped. Trapped by her failures, trapped by her past, trapped by a culture she had deliberately turned her back on for so long. "I heard her parents are arranging a marriage for her," Liam added, his voice grim, almost whispered, as if speaking of a tragedy. "With whoever will have her at her age, after she's had boyfriends. It's a huge scandal for their family, apparently a deep shame. She's basically being married off as a last resort to mitigate the dishonor she brought upon them by leaving and living so freely. The words hit me like a physical blow, a punch to the gut that stole my breath. Arranged marriage. At 29. After dating. The weight of her traditional society's judgment, the profound shame, the complete and utter loss of her independence, her autonomy, her very identity. My breath caught in my throat, my mind reeling. This wasn't just a career setback. It was a complete and utter dismantling of her entire existence, everything she had fought for, everything she had dreamed of becoming. And it was, unequivocally, because of me. My petty revenge, as I had called it, that seemingly small, justifiable act of holding her accountable, had been anything but. It had been a sledgehammer. It had been a final, crushing weight that had sent her spiraling into a life she despised. My stomach churned, a sickening mixture of shock and guilt washing over me. The quiet satisfaction I had felt months ago vanished instantly, replaced by a horrifying, gut-wrenching realization. I hadn't just stopped her from getting a job. I had inadvertently pushed her back into a life she loathed, stripped her of her autonomy, potentially condemned her to a future of quiet desperation, a future she had spent years running from with every fiber of her being. The thought of her, trapped, heartbroken, resentful, living a life that wasn't hers, haunted me. I tried desperately to rationalize it. She had stolen from me. She had been dishonest. She deserved consequences for her actions. But this felt disproportionate, catastrophic, almost biblical in its severity. It wasn't about justice anymore, it was about utter destruction. I had sought to correct a wrong, and in doing so, I had obliterated a life, extinguished a spark, however flawed, that once burned brightly. This was the true climax, not a confrontation with Ellie herself, but a painful, agonizing confrontation with myself, with the unforeseen, devastating consequences of my own actions. I had wanted her to face consequences for her dishonesty, but I had unleashed a torrent of suffering on her, a wave of despair that was far beyond anything I had ever intended. My success in blocking her career, my quiet act of retribution, had led directly to her ultimate downfall, a poetic, yet chilling, consequence of my desire for retribution. The victory I had felt had turned to ash in my mouth. The conversation with Liam left me in a state of profound shock and deep, agonizing regret. For weeks, I couldn't shake the vivid image of Ellie, defeated, stripped of her independence, returning to a life she despised, a life she had fled with such determination. My triumph had curdled into a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth, a constant reminder of the devastation I had inadvertently wrought. My art, once a source of pure joy and fulfillment, now felt tainted by this dark shadow, overshadowed by the weight of my actions. I found myself questioning everything: my motives, my actions, the very nature of justice and revenge. Was I truly a good person, or had I become, through my own choices, a quiet agent of ruin? I spent sleepless nights replaying the moment I decided to tell Ms. Davies, wondering if I could have done anything differently, if there was another path. I tried to bury the guilt, to tell myself it wasn't entirely my fault, that Ellie's own choices, her pattern of dishonesty, and her struggles had ultimately led her to that painful crossroads. But the knowledge that my single act, my decisive intervention, had been the final, decisive push that sent her life spiraling gnawed at me, a relentless, aching pain in my chest. It was a burden I carried every day. I decided then and there that I would never allow myself to be consumed by such vindictiveness again, no matter the perceived slight. It was a harsh, painful lesson, one that reshaped my core beliefs. I focused on my work with renewed intensity, poured my energy into creating art that uplifted, that brought joy, that communicated empathy, not sorrow or retribution. I started volunteering at a local art therapy center in Oak Haven, Dale, using my skills to help others find their voice, to express their pain and find healing through creativity. I made a conscious, daily effort to be more empathetic, more understanding, to approach situations with compassion rather than judgment, to offer forgiveness instead of seeking retribution. Months turned into a year, then a little more. The guilt never completely faded, but it lessened, transforming from an acute agony into a quiet, constant reminder of the profound power of my actions, of the unforeseen consequences of even seemingly small decisions. Life in Oak Haven, Dale went on. I continued to thrive professionally, my reputation for integrity and kindness growing steadily. I was respected, not just for my art, but for my character, for the person I had become. I learned to let go of slights more easily, to choose peace over retribution, to value my inner calm above the satisfaction of proving a point. I had found a new normal, one built on a foundation of humility, compassion, and a deeper understanding of the complexities of human suffering, forever changed by the ripple effect of one seemingly small act of revenge. I was a different Chloe, more grounded, more reflective. Then, one crisp autumn evening, a little over a year after Liam's revelation, as I was closing up my studio, tidying my brushes and shutting down my computer, my phone buzzed with an unfamiliar number. I answered hesitantly, my heart giving a slight flutter of surprise. A voice, soft and hesitant, spoke my name. "Chloe, it's Ellie." My blood ran cold. Ellie, after all this time, after all that had happened. My mind raced, bracing for an accusation, a furious confrontation, a torrent of bitter words. But her voice was different, softer, quieter than I remembered, stripped of its old confidence. She sounded broken, yet oddly serene. "I know this is a strange call," she began, her voice barely a whisper, as if she were talking to herself as much as to me. "But I needed to tell you something. I heard about what you did back then at your agency, and about what happened to me after." My heart hammered against my ribs, so loud I was sure she could hear it through the phone. Here it was, the moment of reckoning. I waited, holding my breath, bracing for the onslaught. "I hated you for it, Chloe," she continued, her voice trembling slightly but surprisingly devoid of true anger. "I truly hated you. I felt like my life was over, going back home. It was everything I had run from. The shame, the disappointment in my parents' eyes, the arranged marriage talks. It was a nightmare. I thought you had destroyed me." I closed my eyes, tears pricking at them, a different kind of tears this time. This was the raw truth. "But," she continued, and this was the twist, the truly unexpected part, the one that shattered all my preconceived notions. Something shifted. Being forced back, stripped of everything I thought I wanted, everything I thought I needed to be happy, I had to confront myself. I had to face the consequences of my own dishonesty, my own arrogance, my own shortcuts. I realized how much I had relied on deception, on taking shortcuts. How much I had hurt people like you by taking what wasn't mine. There was a pause, a long, heavy silence, filled only with the faint static of the connection. "I'm still here in my hometown," she said, her voice stronger now, though still tinged with sorrow, with the echoes of a life irrevocably changed. "The marriage talks are still happening, and it's a difficult path. But I've started painting again. Truly painting for myself, not for anyone else's approval. No plagiarism, no shortcuts, just honest work, a way to express what I'm feeling." I've reconnected with my family, trying to mend those broken ties, trying to find a new kind of peace with my traditions. It's not the life I imagined, not the freedom I sought, but it's real. And I think in a strange, painful way, your act of justice, no matter how harsh it felt at the time, forced me to find a truth I was running from. It shattered my illusion of control, and in that shattering, I found something genuine within myself. I'm not saying it was right, Chloe, but I'm saying thank you for making me finally face myself. The line went dead. I stood there in my quiet studio, phone still pressed to my ear, tears streaming down my face. Not tears of guilt, not anymore, not entirely. They were tears of profound, complicated understanding, of a strange, unexpected relief. Ellie, broken by circumstances, but perhaps finally whole in a way she never was before. My act of revenge, born of anger and a deep sense of violated trust, had not only ruined her future as she had seen it, but it had also, inadvertently, salvaged her soul, forced her onto a path of painful but genuine self-discovery. And in doing so, it had also, unexpectedly, healed a part of mine. The consequence was not just her ruin, but her rebirth, and in a way I never anticipated, mine too. The world was far more complex than simple right and wrong, and justice could take paths no one ever saw coming.